I'm not afraid of.
As people around the globe have come together to pay tribute to President Nelson, our KSL team is coming together as well.
Daniel Woodruff is at the conference center where the funeral will begin in less than 30 minutes. Daniel.
Yeah, we'll send it back to you.
Daniel Woodruff reporting for us. Many people looking forward to hearing those tributes. Thank you.
We'll go now to Dan Rascone, who is also outside the conference center. Dan, we're smiling as we see people just flock in. So many people eager and excited to be there and pay their respects today.
Yeah, you know, they really are. I mean, 101 years old, that's an amazing accomplishment for anyone out there. President Nelson basically working all the way up until the last day he passed away. It's just amazing to think that 100 years old, 101, he was still leading a worldwide church. Well, many of those members came to love him, even though they did not know him personally. They came to know him through his talks, through all that he did. But he was really known for his love of family. I mean, of course, he was a great father, great grandfather, and husband. But it was one of those things where he never put family aside. And somehow he managed to balance all of the things he had going on in his life and still keep his family front and center.
Our family is the focus of our greatest work and joy in this life.
I think what he's always done is wherever he is, that's where he is. So when he's at work, he's 100% at work. When he's home, he's 100% at home. When he's doing his church duty, he's 100% church duty. And so I think maybe that's how he balances things. I don't know. But he seems to do it, and he seems to do it effortlessly.
As a father, he's always been loving and has always tried to make time, well, not tried, he's succeeded in making time for family. And more importantly, it's obvious to each one of us as the children and family members that it's not just that he makes time, it's that family is a priority, if not the priority.
Yeah, very much so, a big priority in President Nelson's life. Yesterday, I had a chance to talk to one of the granddaughters. There's 56 grandchildren, and I spoke to one of them, and she said, you know, everybody thought they were his favorite, and just the love that he had for every one of his children, and he knew them by name. And so again, this was, obviously a man who had extensive responsibility worldwide. He had a lot on his plate, but yet he still took time for family. And again, back live out here, we're just waiting for the funeral services to get underway. Still people showing up here. A very somber day, but I think a day of celebration where you're celebrating a legacy, a man that has lived and accomplished so much in his life over so many years and influenced so many people. So a day of celebration in that respect. Back to you guys in the studio.
Dan, we've been looking at family photos of President Nelson and his family and his posterity. Wow, what a blessing indeed. Thank you for that report.
Those throwback family videos.
Greet so many of the public, and as were President Nelson's children. And it was a lovely opportunity to express condolences to them and let them know how much we here at KSL-TV and church-owned media appreciate their willingness to share him with us and to share their private time with him, with us. And they're expressing gratitude for all that everyone has done for him and how grateful they are to have had him for as long as they did, even though they were tearful, expressing how much they will miss him. He was the leader of a great family, a large family, and he never forgot them. Every month there was a gathering. So yes, they will miss those moments, and I'm sure they will continue them. But that this is a time to express sorrow and joy, perhaps of gratitude at the same time.
Yes, yes, and that's a gracious and appropriate acknowledgement. We are mourning the loss of a prophet, of the president of a worldwide church, and they are mourning the loss. Thousands gathered to remember him, and the KSL team has gathered as well to honor President Nelson's century of service. Let's start with Daniel Woodruff, who is outside the conference center where the funeral just concluded. Daniel, we heard from two of the President Nelson's children today in a very touching tribute.
Yeah, two of his children spoke at the...
Daniel, thank you.
Dan Rascone is joining us now. And Dan, we also heard from many church leaders who very tenderly testified of President Nelson's Christ-like character and example.
Yes, that's correct. It was very moving speeches there from the leading body of the church right now. Basically, the three men who kind of oversee the church as far as from the quorum of the 12 apostles. But just behind me, as you can see, we're right along West Temple here. You could see the Salt Lake City police officers lining up. This is where the procession will come down. They'll go southbound here along West Temple. They'll turn left on South Temple, and then they'll go straight to the Salt Lake City Cemetery, where President Nelson will be buried. Now, again, as you mentioned, we've got President Oaks, who is the president of the Quorum of the 12 Apostles. He is the one that's expected to take over for President Nelson at a later date here. But they all spoke and they all shared their own personal witness and testimony of President Nelson's calling as a prophet.
President Nelson, for so many reasons, not the least of which was his unfailing kindness to everyone that he met in the church.
I have been an eyewitness to President Nelson's ability to help each person in a meeting to feel that his or her opinion on a particular matter was important to him. President Nelson's desire to hear these opinions and views was real. He sincerely wanted to hear what others thought.
In the 7.5 years of President Nelson's service as our prophet leader, we have been privileged to meet with many national and religious leaders, including many currently serving as ambassadors. In every visit of these groups, President Eyring and I marveled at the impact President Nelson had on these leaders. They came to meet him. His smile, the warmth of his voice, and the power of his presence melted hearts.
That was President Oaks there speaking in regards to some touching moments that he also talked about sitting next to President Nelson 34 years before President Nelson was called as the president of the church. At that time, he shared that he wasn't really, he'd kind of just speak up in meetings and those kind of things. He wasn't a decisive, decision maker necessarily because he wasn't leading the church. But as soon as he became president, President Oaks says, boy, President Nelson just switched gears there and really became a decisive decision maker. And President Oaks saying he put on his seatbelt, says this is going to be a fun ride. So just some of the thoughts in regards to some of the top leaders of the church right now. Again, those that are sitting next to President Nelson for many decades. Back to you guys in the studio.
Yeah, really great to hear some of those lighthearted moments and just how their friendship evolved over the years. Dan, thank you. Well, Brian Carlson also attended the funeral.
Thank you so much. Let's check in with Dan Rascone, who is at the conference center where we expect the procession will leave shortly for the private burial. Dan.
Yes, that's correct. You can see the people flooding out of the conference center right now. Let me kind of get out of the way there. You can see hundreds of people just behind me here, all lining up along West Temple here. We're just south of the conference center. They're going to be coming out of the conference center, and then they'll be heading southbound on West Temple, turn left on South Temple, and then they'll be heading to the Salt Lake City Cemetery where President Nelson will be laid to rest. We're being told also that his son-in-law will be dedicating the grave there. But again, we've been talking about this all day long here as far as just the beautiful services that have been in tribute of President Nelson over the last week or so, and then to sum it all up right here at the conference center with some beautiful messages and some beautiful insight also that we don't normally hear, as we've heard, don't normally hear at General Conference, but to be able to hear some of those friends and family and others that are so close to him and see him in action day after day after day, to be able to hear some of those stories were very touching. Even Elder Eyring, who has been side by side with President Nelson for decades, he talked about President Nelson operating on his mother And President Irene, or Elder Irene, said that I believe it was 8 times, and President Nelson was like, no, it was 9 times that I operated on your mother. So those kind of the details when you're that age are just incredible. I mean, this was a man who had quite the legacy, an incredible legacy, 101 years old. Of course, many of the members wanted him to live much longer. One of his, crowning efforts there was to rebuild and rededicate, the Salt Lake City Temple, and that was huge. And, just the temple work in general, overall around the world. And so, again, we're back here live with the Salt Lake City Police Department. They're all lined up. People are all lined up. They have their phones out and ready to capture the procession as it goes by. I'll send it back to you guys.
Dan, thank you. That right there, a touching image in and of itself. They've just sat through a lengthy funeral, but everyone wanting to stick around with phones in hand to capture the moment that their prophet passes by. Dan, thank you so much.
We turn now to Daniel Woodruff, who has more outside of the
with honor. Just very touching remarks
really
from his 2 children today.
And we just want to show you a live look now as the hearse is making its way to the Salt Lake City Cemetery. Had left from West Temple, made a left there on South Temple, and will be heading to the Salt Lake City Cemetery. Right now, we are going to check in with Dan Rascone, who is there at the conference center. Dan.
Hey guys, you can see this happening right now behind me here. Here comes the procession along the way, the hearse and, the vehicles, and also obviously the Salt Lake City Police Department. President Nelson, body now being taken to the Salt Lake City Cemetery, where he'll be laid to rest. These are all family members, of course. People lining the street here. Just a very tender, touching moment for Latter-day Saints. Hundreds of them lining the street here of West Temple now, kind of saying their final goodbyes to an incredible leader, an incredible spiritual leader, and also a father and husband and grandfather. Again, we've been hearing some amazing tributes. I mean, you can only imagine how big of a family gathering, of course, this is here right now that have come here. We've talked a little bit about the numbers as far as, 10 children and 57 grandchildren and 171 great-grandchildren and also 1 great-great-grandchild. So a lot of people heading over to the cemetery. This is more of a private family event that will be taking place here at the Salt Lake City Cemetery. We see people waving to family members as they go by. Obviously, they would need a couple different buses here. We see several different buses coming out of the conference center there because of the large number of family members. Let's see, we've got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and more coming out of the conference center there. So this is a big family, and this is a man who was dearly loved, and dearly loved not only by family members, but also members of the Church of Jesus Christ Latter-day Saints. He was put in when he was 93 years old, and then he went and traveled the world on a nonstop tour, basically across several different continents and places, and visiting members one-on-one. So just an incredible legacy of being able to reach out and be able to touch the hearts of people all across the world and meet members from all across the world. And that's why I believe that he was so loved by so many Latter-day Saints. But again, the procession just went by. They're on their way now to the Salt Lake City Cemetery, where we're told the a son-in-law will be dedicating the grave there, and he'll be buried next to his wife, his first wife. And then, of course, the next part of this, of course, is calling the next president of the church. Back to you guys in the studio.
Oh, Dan, thanks so much for that perspective. It's really neat seeing everybody out there and waving along with the 5 buses.
The bus load.
Dan
The bus load.
5 buses for his 300-plus family members. So that was great to see.
We'll check in quickly with
Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints saying farewell today to beloved prophet President Russell M. Nelson. Members of the Tabernacle Choir at Temple Square singing the song the late prophet wrote.
Yeah, tens of thousands watching on TV and in person at the conference center. We have team coverage throughout the evening with highlights from those speaking today and thoughts from those who attended. We start with news specialist Daniel Woodruff. And Daniel, 2 of President Nelson's children spoke at the funeral.
They did. President Nelson, as we...
Thank you. Also today, a personal and a heartfelt tribute to President Nelson from those who now lead the church.
We continue our team coverage with news specialist Dan Rascone live outside the conference center. And Dan, we got to see a different side of President Nelson.
That's right, Debbie and Mike. You know, it's not very often we get a little taste of the behind the scenes there with top church leaders and some funny moments. We got a little taste of that today, especially with President Oaks, who sat side by side with next to President Nelson for more than 40 years. Now, President Oaks shared during the time that he served with President Nelson during his 34 years in the Quorum of the 12 Apostles. President Nelson would often just listen to the discussions and be more supportive. But when he became president of the church, he became the decisive decision maker.
As I saw President Nelson as the decision maker, rather than the wise and supportive member of the Quorum of the 12 I had sat beside for 34 years. Figuratively speaking, I tightened my seatbelt a few more notches and said to myself, being a counselor in this first presidency is going to be fun.
Now, President Irene also spoke of President Nelson's ability to make sure that everyone's decision mattered. He also told of how President Nelson operated on his mother 9 times. Elder Jeffrey R. Holland also spoke of President Nelson and his gift to be able to love one another, love others, and make sure that, everybody is noticed. We're going to hear more from them coming up at 5 o'clock. At Temple Square, I'm Dan Russ. Going back to you guys in the studio.
Dan, it has been remarkable hearing all of these stories. Thanks for that today. Well, joining us now is KSL religion specialist. Thanks, Kevin. Well, a suspect is now under arrest in connection to last week's bomb threat at Ben Lomond High School in Ogden. Police say a teen in Washington State is now in custody. Officials say this remains an active investigation, and they're working closely with federal, state, and local partners to ensure all appropriate charges are pursued. They add there is no ongoing threat to the public or to school safety.
Red Cross helping those
students in the building. Now, the Ogden City Police Department says the underage suspect who threatened Ben Lomond High School last week has been arrested. Last Thursday, just after 8:30 a.m., detectives say a teen in Washington State called a bomb threat to the school. The threat was taken as credible, and the school was evacuated and swept for explosives. Now, we're awaiting to hear from a police captain here in Ogden. We're just moments away from that happening. We're just waiting for everyone to get into places here. But just to bring you back to what I was just talking about the underage suspect who threatened Ben Lomond High School last week. Again, that threat was taken as credible, and that school was evacuated and swept for explosives. Ogden police are working with federal and state police to screen that teen for charges. And because of the suspect's age, his name will not be released. The police say there was no ongoing threat to the school or community. Now, we were just at Ben Lomond High School for a few minutes before we rushed to the scene of this presser, and there are parts of the street that are blocked off. We were told that
President Nelson was 101 years old.
Today, inside and outside the Salt Lake City Conference Center, we heard touching tributes to the spiritual leader, husband, father, and grandfather. We have live team coverage now of today's remarks and the lasting impact that President Nelson makes on Utah.
Let's go first to news specialist Daniel Woodruff in downtown Salt Lake City. And Daniel, President Nelson leaving behind a loving family and admirers all around the world.
Yeah, and the funeral today might live at 5.
Thanks, Daniel. And other speakers at the funeral include the top leaders of the church who served with President Nelson side by side for decades.
Yeah, news specialist Dan Rascone has that story. Joins us live right now. And Dan, some wonderful tributes today.
Really some wonderful tributes indeed. You know, these are top leaders of the church that serve right now, and they know President Nelson so well. They've sat together, they've served together, and they've even traveled together. So when they speak about President Nelson, they know what they're talking about. In that regard, President Dallin H. Oaks and Elder Henry B. Eyring and Elder Jeffrey R. Holland all spoke talking about President Nelson's love and care for others and his incredible leadership.
I have been an eyewitness to President Nelson's ability to help each person in a meeting to feel that his or her opinion on a particular matter was important to him. President Nelson's desire to hear these opinions and views was real.
He was dignified and courteous with every man and woman he met, be they diplomats or other dignitaries, new neighbors, or complete strangers. And he loved the rising generation.
President Oaks spoke of how once President Nelson became prophet, he buckled his seatbelt and said, "This is going to be a fun ride because of all the decisions and changes President Nelson made from the very beginning." We'll hear from President Oaks coming up at 6 o'clock. I'm Dan Rascone, live at 5. Back to you guys.
Dan, thank you so much. Thousands of people packing the conference center today.
Daniel, thank you.
After the children of President Nelson gave their remarks, general authorities said the church also spoke as well.
News specialist Dan Rascone has more on what they said. Dan, some fun and interesting memories.
There really was. You know, many of these top church leaders have sat next to President Nelson for decades here, so they know him very well. And today they were able to share a few insights or behind-the-scenes stories.
He was dignified and courteous with every man and woman he met.
He became my best friend and most effective teacher.
I am grateful to have known President Russell M. Nelson. I am grateful to have seen him magnify in a magnificent way.
3 of the top leaders of the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints sharing their personal moments with President Nelson, who led the church for 7.5 years before he passed away at 101 years old. President Oaks says things changed when President Nelson became the church's 17th leader.
I saw President Nelson as the decision maker rather than the wise and supportive member of the Quorum of the 12 I had sat beside for 34 years. Figuratively speaking, I tightened my seatbelt a few more notches and said to myself, being a counselor in this first presidency is going to be fun.
For Elder Holland and Elder Irene, it was his personal touch that's left an incredible legacy.
I have been an eyewitness to President Nelson's ability to help each person in a meeting to feel that his or her opinion on a particular matter was important to him.
I love President Nelson for so many reasons, not the least of which was his unfailing kindness to everyone that he met in the church.
Yeah, some very tender moments in this funeral service. One of President Nelson's most quoted talks, that of being a peacemaker, something these leaders say he lived by. Mike, back to you.
I love what President Oaks said. Buckle up, essentially, right? That's what they had to do. Great stuff. Dan, thank you.
Coming up next, the star.